let's just touch on this for a few minutes before we go to the post game. Where are you at now with how to relate to the Democratic Party? I'll just say I think that it's a very unsatisfying conversation to me, because I think that, you know, the posture of forget the Democrats and either sort of third party fantasies. I mean, I did a conversation recently with C. Derek Varn of Zero Books. He's a really brilliant guy. And he said, he's like, in order to do the types of electoral reforms you would need to make third parties viable in the United States, this has the same level of like practical possibility as armed insurrection, which is a slight exaggeration, but it's like not as much of an exaggeration as people realize. Stipulating that, like, of course, in a place like New York City, like, why the hell not have a socialist party that runs against Democrats and so on?
We could have more votes than the Republicans ever by Staten Island.
Yeah, right. No doubt. So to engage with Democratic Party, I don't have time for sort of anti-electoral fantasies and false equivalencies. On the other hand, I'm not entirely convinced that the Democratic Party is just a shell of our vehicle and of what our desires are. I think both because of the current dynamics of the Democratic Party, but even just actually historically. I mean, if you look at, like, part of the reason Jeremy Corbyn could take over labor the way he has is that, like, Blair and Brown were the aberration. That's historically a labor party, whether center to center right, but he has a tradition he can pull from. The Democratic Party is a very complex tradition. In some ways, the last thing I'll say, I mean, take one that's positive. We focus on the negatives a lot. Part of the reason I think that there's a real constituency for Medicare for all is because people like my grandmother, who's like an old line Union Democrat, knows that, like, that is what, you know, Truman and FDR said we should have. And it makes sense to her. And that is in the context of a Union Democratic tradition, not a socialist one. So it's a balance, but there's a lot of other ways in which the fact that the Democratic Party is not a labor party and has been everything from an apartheid party to a business party structurally is not advantageous for us.
Well, it has had a hidden labor party component to it, too, in the 50s and 60s. You know, it did have institutionally the UAW and the AFL and, you know, other kind of groups within the within it. I would say that often one thing that Corbyn had to his advantage is that there was a fortress to storm. People who often say that you could just take over the Democratic Party say there's no real big structure. There's no way to impose party discipline. There's no structure to keep it from being something else. I mean, this sounds glib. I get into it in more depth in my book, but I think the fact that there is no structure actually is a source of strength for the corporate forces within the party, because there's not just one fortress to storm. There's 1,000, and it's constantly shifting. So I think, in other words, and this is something I do. I mean, I'm not really plugging this book because it's not going to be out till like the end of April next year. I did finish it though.
Nice.
I see your board isn't even.
I'm trying to think of what to put for this. I was gonna do this,
baby, put down that pipe
just to be a jerk.
My pipe up.
And I also like the classic Bill O'Reilly.
Yeah. Give me any Alex Jones.
Oh, do we have an Alex drop for him?
This is all coded.
Perfect. It's all coded. It's ready to go.
Oh my God, Alex. Greatest broadcaster of our generation. Just amazing.
Any generation, maybe.
Yeah, no, he's up there. He's fucking great.
So
we've got some Alex Jones for the post game. Don't worry.
That's good. That's good. That's the reason why I come here, just to catch up my Jonesisms. So I do think you need to. Seth Ackerman talked about it in a Jackman piece that's already out. It came out in late 2016, called "Blueprint for a New Party." Basically, I think we need to use the Democratic Party. But not just as individuals who decide to do well. I think we need to have a coherent organization together to say we're going to run 20 candidates under this common platform, this common program, and tell people we're not just regular Democrats, we're democratic socialists, we're whatever.
Right.
And even if we are running on the Democratic ballot line, we form our own caucus, we have our own independent funding, there's some degree of internal cohesion and discipline. Then maybe you reach a point where you could rerun again as independents, or start going from running 100% of the Democratic ballot line to running on 30% of the Democratic party ballot line. And of course, you're going to have to do politics. You're going to have to figure out the mechanisms it takes to not become more conservative or develop a bureaucracy that pushes you to the right or whatever else. But you basically seek, just like we're right now using Bernie Sanders, and Bernie Sanders is using the Democratic Party to construct something leftward.
Right.
We do that, but in a little bit more cohesive way, because right now it's very hard to tell what are the 20 points that our revolution candidates have to agree on. They're not really linked together, even to the extent that the Tea Party folks were linked together.
Right.
Their funding base is none of it's really coming from unions or whatnot. So I would think of it as we need to break with the Democratic Party, but we need to go through the Democratic Party. And if we're going through the Democratic Party and I happen to be Ron and the party we're able to transform the party, then so be it. Then I'm Ron.
Sure.
But the strategy, I think, can't be creating national third parties. In New York City and Vermont and a few places right away we could run as independents. I just think the whole Green Party effort, at least at this point, has been it's become sad. It's become pretty like a laughingstock.
Well, they're because their strategy is just completely off. Let's actually take a second. We're going to go to the post game in a second. This is a clip from actually just we want to just shout her out because she's a great candidate, and obviously what's her full name again? Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She's running against Joe Crowley in a district that covers part of Queens and the Bronx, New York City. When is voting? Voting day, I think, is actually next week in this race. But is that right? Maybe we could look that up.
It's coming up.
Yeah, it's like I think it's next week.
It is next week. So she's been running, I want to say, really a distinctly impressive campaign, and she's somebody who I think is a positive version of things we're talking about. I mean, she's a Bernie person. She's been involved in everything from Standing Rock to Black Lives Matter, and Joe Crowley is kind of like the sort of quintessential kind of fusion of kind of like old school conservative sort of machine Democrat, but also moneyed up by all of the oligarchic interests of our time, Wall Street, real estate. He also voted in ways that have seriously harmed Puerto Rico and left it open to the type of vulture capitalists that are stripping it apart. She's running a really effective campaign, and let's just play a minute of their debate.
Endorsed by DSA.
Endorsed by DSA and Our Revolution. Let's play a minute of this debate from earlier this week.
Antithetical to everything that I believe in, and that's what I fight for every day.
You know what? If this organization is as fascist as you have called it, and you have said it's fascist, then why don't you adopt the stance to eliminate it? This is a moral problem, and your response has been to apply more paperwork to this situation, to have ICE collect more information on immigrants, and that puts our communities in danger, and it also conveys a profound misunderstanding of how we should be approaching this problem.
She's great. And that's by the way, that is the sort of quintessential distinction I'd say between a socialist and liberal position. It's fascist, let's have it fill out more forms, versus it's fascist, let's dismantle it, as we must do with ICE, of course. So very eager.
Yeah. And just seems sharper and seems smarter in all her media than other people, and I think that's really important. That's a far cry from socialists being the kind of pie in the sky, confused, whatever. I think we have to seem sharper with our numbers, sharper with whatever, and she really is that way. Definitely.
Folks, as always, want to thank everybody. We continue to grow on Patreon, and if you become a patron now, you will enjoy just a marathon Dave Rubin takedown that is going to be happening in the postgame. Our friend Amy Teresa, who is the co-host of Dead Pundit Society and comrade on Twitter, she actually gave us time codes for this, and it's going to be savage. Taking on the dumbest man on the internet. That's quite a comment. Listen back to
There's a big market for watching Dave Rubin do dumb things.
We're going to Mystery Science Theater it soon, no doubt, including probably more of Rogan putting him in logic chokeholds. The recent, we just did the illicit history couplet with Mark Potanga, actually, from the Belgian Workers' Party, based off of a piece in Catalyst. Then Mark Blythe and I talked about the Eurozone. Become a patron today. There's a massive amount of content you get. And also in the postgame, I will be reading a selection from The President is Missing by Bill Clinton and James Patterson. And we will also be speculating on future projects with the theme of where did the president go? Where could he be? Also in the postgame. It's time to become a patron. Patreon.com/TMBS. Thanks to everybody in the TMBS universe. Thank you, Bhaskar Sunkara, crew, Jacobin. He's staying with us for the postgame, of course. Thank you to Matt Leck, David Slavic, intern James, and David Griscom. We will see you shortly.